Outlaws attack a single mother's farm, unaware she's a former Green Beret sniper. The autumn air carried the scent of pine and coming frost as Sarah McKenna stood on her porch, watching the sun dip behind the mountains that cradled Fox Hollow, Montana. At 42, she still possessed the lean, muscular frame that had served her well during her military career, though most locals saw only a hard-working single mother managing a modest farm. Her weathered hands gripped a mug of tea that had long gone cold, her hazel eyes scanning the tree line with the practiced vigilance that never quite left those who had seen combat. Scout, her Belgian Malinois, sat alert beside her, ears pricked forward. His coat caught the golden light of dusk, but his posture betrayed tension that mirrored Sarah's own unease. 6 years into retirement, the bond between handler and military dog remained unbroken. Scout had followed her home after they both survived an ambush in northern Afghanistan, her last mission before hanging up her uniform. "You feel it too, don't you, old friend?" she murmured, resting a hand on his broad head. The dog responded with a low whine, pressing against her leg. Behind them, the screen door creaked open as 11-year-old Lily stepped out, her brother Danny, 8, trailing behind. "Mom, Scout's been weird all day," Lily observed, her perceptive eyes, so like Sarah's own, taking in the tension in both her mother and the dog. "Is something wrong?" Sarah composed her features into a reassuring smile. "Just a change in the weather coming," she replied, though the knot in her stomach suggested something far more concerning. 3 black motorcycles had rolled through town that morning, their riders watching her a beat too long when she was loading feed at the general store. It might have seemed like nothing to most, but Sarah recognized predatory assessment when she saw it. She'd made inquiries, subtly, of course. The Shadow Raiders had been establishing territory across 3 counties, and whispers of intimidation, arson, and worse followed in their wake. Small-town police weren't equipped to handle organized criminal enterprises, and those who tried often found themselves outgunned or corrupted. "Finish your homework and then we'll make dinner," Sarah said, gently ushering her children back inside. "I need to check on Thatcher." Thatcher, an ancient gray mare with arthritis in her front legs, had been Danny's first riding horse, gentle and patient with the boy when he was still learning. Now, though too old for riding, she remained a beloved fixture of their small farm, serving as a companion to the younger horses and a quiet confidant for Sarah during sleepless nights. The old mare stood in her stall, head hanging over the half-door. Her soft eyes brightened at Sarah's approach, and she nickered softly, stretching her neck for attention. Sarah ran her hands along Thatcher's neck, pressing her forehead against the horse's brow. "What do you think, old girl? Are we overreacting?" she whispered. Thatcher snorted softly, as if offering her sage counsel. Sarah had acquired the mare shortly after moving to Fox Hollow, drawn to the animal's calm resilience. In many ways, Thatcher reminded her of her grandmother, steady, wise, unflappable in crisis. As darkness settled over the farm, Sarah completed her security checks, a routine disguised as ordinary evening chores. The children saw their mother feeding animals and securing barns. They didn't see her checking sightlines, calculating distances, noting vulnerabilities in their perimeter. After tucking the children into bed, Sarah retreated to her bedroom closet. Behind a false panel lay a steel case containing her past, a custom M40A5 sniper rifle, meticulously maintained despite years of disuse, and several handguns with sufficient ammunition. She ran her fingers over the case but left it locked. Not yet, she told herself, but soon, perhaps. The following week brought a chill that seeped into bones and whispered warnings of winter's approach. It also brought more motorcycles through town, their engines disrupting the peaceful quiet of Fox Hollow. Sarah noted 5 of them parked outside Gus's tavern when she drove into town for supplies. At the general store, Martha Winters, who had owned the establishment for nearly 40 years, leaned across the counter. Her arthritis-gnarled hands trembled slightly as she passed Sarah her change. "Those men asked about you," she whispered, her lined face set with concern. "About your farm. Said they represented investors looking for property." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Did they know?" "What did you tell them, Martha?" "That McKinnis have owned that land for 4 generations and you weren't selling." Martha's chin lifted defiantly, though they didn't seem like any investors I've ever seen. "Sarah, be careful." On the drive home, Sarah noticed the black pickup truck following at a discreet distance. Too discreet for coincidence. Scout, riding in the passenger seat, growled low in his throat, his amber eyes fixed on the side mirror. "I know, buddy," Sarah murmured. "We've got company." She took the long way home, making several unnecessary turns through the county's back roads. The truck maintained its distance, confirmation enough of Sarah's suspicions. Instead of heading directly to her farm, she drove to Sheriff Tom Darrow's office. Tom had been 2 years behind her in high school, a decent man with a fondness for fishing and an unfortunate tendency to avoid confrontation. His eyebrows rose when Sarah walked in with Scout at her heel, the Belgian Malinois maintaining perfect formation beside her. "Those men in town aren't investors," Sarah said without preamble. "They're shadow raiders, and they're watching my property." Tom's weathered face creased with concern. "Now, Sarah, that's a serious accusation. They've caused no trouble here yet." Keyword being yet, Sarah replied. "Tom, I've filed reports about suspicious vehicles. I've documented strangers photographing my property line. What's it going to take? Do I need to wait until they're on my doorstep?" The sheriff sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I can increase patrols, but without evidence of a crime." Sarah recognized the limitations of his position, but frustration still burned in her chest. "If something happens, I want it on record that I sought help first." That evening, as Sarah tucked Danny into bed, he clutched his stuffed coyote, a gift from his father before the divorce, to his chest. "Mom, is Scout okay?" He wouldn't leave the window all day. Sarah smoothed her son's dark hair from his forehead. "Scout is fine. He's just being extra watchful. Like when you were soldiers together?" Danny asked, his eyes wide with the innocent fascination children have for their parents' past lives. Sarah nodded, though her throat tightened. The children knew a sanitized version of her military service, that she and Scout had protected people. They didn't know the full extent of what that protection had entailed or the toll it had taken. Exactly like that. "Now sleep tight, little man." She kissed his forehead and moved to the doorway. "Mom." Danny's voice was small in the dimness. "Scout will keep us safe, right?" Sarah paused, her hand on the light switch. "We all keep each other safe in this family. That's what families do." Later, as wind rattled the windows of the old farmhouse, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with Scout at her feet, a local map spread before her. She marked positions, angles, distances, skills never forgotten, merely set aside. In the barn, her horses shifted restlessly, sensing the coming storm, both meteorological and otherwise. 3 days later, Sarah was mucking out stalls when Scout's bark shattered the morning quiet, sharp, urgent, a warning call Sarah recognized from their deployment days. She dropped the pitchfork and moved swiftly to the barn entrance, keeping to the shadows. A black SUV had pulled up at her gate, and 2 men in expensive leather jackets stood examining her property. Even from this distance, the bulges beneath their jackets were evident to Sarah's trained eye. Armed. Assessing. Planning. Thatcher whinnied nervously from her stall, sensing the tension. The old mare's distress seemed to trigger something in Scout, who lowered his head and emitted a growl that rumbled like distant thunder. Sarah retreated into the barn, pulling her phone from her pocket to call Lily, who was watching Danny in the house. "Stay inside, lock the doors, and go to the safe room if you hear anything unusual," she instructed, keeping her voice steady. "This is just like our drills, honey." "Is it them?" "The men from town?" Lily asked, her voice small but composed, too composed for a child her age. Sometimes Sarah forgot how much her daughter had already endured, between the divorce and the constant relocations before settling in Fox Hollow. "Just some people looking at the property. Nothing to worry about, but let's be safe." Sarah ended the call and moved to Thatcher's stall. The mare's eyes rolled white with anxiety, her arthritic legs trembling slightly. Sarah stroked her neck, murmuring reassurances while keeping her own breathing even. The other horses, 2 quarter horses and a young Appaloosa, picked up on Thatcher's distress, shifting restlessly in their stalls. "Easy, girl. We've weathered worse, haven't we?" Sarah whispered, pressing her cheek against Thatcher's soft muzzle. In moments of crisis, Sarah had always found horses to be mirrors of human emotion, reflecting tension back, but also responding to calm leadership. Steadying Thatcher became her momentary anchor, a task to focus on while her mind cataloged options and threat assessments. When she stepped out of the barn 10 minutes later, it was with the relaxed demeanor of a farmer interrupted during chores. Scout remained at her side, his posture alert but controlled. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she called, walking toward the gate with unhurried steps. Up close, she confirmed her initial assessment. These were not ordinary bikers. The older man had the measured stillness of someone with combat experience, while the younger one's eyes constantly scanned for threats, a habit ingrained through training. "Ms. McKenna?" The older man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Frank Miller. This is my associate, Dean Walker. We represent a development group interested in properties in this valley. Sarah matched his artificial smile. Well, Mr. Miller, I'm afraid you've wasted a trip. This farm isn't for sale. Perhaps you haven't heard the right offer yet, Miller suggested, his tone hardening slightly. The surrounding properties have already expressed interest. Isolated holdings like yours will become difficult to maintain. The threat was thinly veiled, and Scout sensed it, moving slightly forward. Sarah placed a subtle hand signal on his back. Stand down. I appreciate your concern for my welfare, Sarah replied, her voice pleasant but firm. But this land has been in my family for generations. I'm not interested in selling at any price. Miller's smile disappeared entirely. Things change, Ms. McKenna. Sometimes quicker than people expect. We'll be in touch. As the SUV pulled away, Sarah memorized the license plate out of habit. Inside, she found Lily and Danny peering anxiously from the living room window. Who were they? Lily asked, her young face serious. Sarah considered her answer carefully. She had always believed in age-appropriate honesty with her children. Some men who want to buy our farm. I told them no. Good, Danny declared with the certainty of childhood. Thatcher would hate moving, and so would Scout. Sarah ruffled his hair, swallowing the knot of anxiety in her throat. That's right. This is our home. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah called her old commanding officer, Colonel James Wilson, now retired and living in Virginia. They spoke in the carefully coded language of those who shared classified histories. The situation you described isn't isolated, Wilson told her, his voice crackling over the secure line. Similar patterns in rural communities across 5 states. Land consolidation through intimidation, followed by resource extraction or development that bypasses environmental regulations. Local authorities? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Compromised or overwhelmed in most cases. There was a pause. Your location has strategic value beyond agriculture, Sarah. The aquifer beneath Fox Hollow connects to 3 watersheds. Whoever controls that water has leverage over half the state. After ending the call, Sarah stood on her porch, watching Scout patrol the perimeter of the yard, his movements precise and purposeful. Overhead, stars punctured the vast Montana sky, unchanged since her grandfather had stood on this same porch and made his own difficult decisions during the Depression. Sarah made her choice that night, as frost formed on the grass and the horses huddled together in the pasture shelter. She would not wait to be victimized. But first, she needed to ensure her children's safety. The weekend brought Claire Montgomery, Sarah's sister, from Missoula for what appeared to be a routine visit. In reality, she was taking Lily and Danny back with her, a precaution disguised as a treat to see their cousins and attend a special exhibit at the Natural History Museum. You're sure this is necessary? Claire asked quietly as they loaded the children's bags into her car. The sisters shared the same determined jaw and direct gaze, though Claire's life as a university professor had spared her the hardening experiences of Sarah's military career. I'm sure, Sarah replied, her voice low. Watch for anyone following you. Vary your route. Use the protocols we discussed. Claire nodded, the gravity of the situation evident in her usually relaxed demeanor. Be careful, Sarah. These aren't insurgents in some foreign desert. No, Sarah agreed grimly. They're worse. They're men who think they're entitled to take whatever they want because they have money and connections. The children's goodbye was more difficult. Danny clung to Sarah, burying his face in her shoulder. I want to stay with you and Scout and Thatcher, he insisted. Sarah held him tightly, memorizing the feel of his small body against hers. It's just for a little while, buddy. And Aunt Claire has that amazing dinosaur exhibit waiting for you. Lily, perceptive beyond her years, studied her mother's face. You're going to stop those men, aren't you? The ones who want our farm. Sarah cupped her daughter's cheek. I'm going to make sure we can stay here safely. Sometimes that means having difficult conversations with people who don't want to listen. After the car disappeared down the long driveway, Sarah turned to find Scout watching her, his intelligent eyes seeming to ask what came next. Behind him, the horses grazed peacefully in the autumn sunlight, unaware of the gathering storm. It's just us now, Scout, she told the dog. Time to go to work. Working methodically, Sarah transformed her property into a defensible position. Hidden cameras at strategic points. Trip wires that would alert her to intruders. Reinforced doors and shutters that could be quickly secured. These precautions might have seemed paranoid to an outsider, but Sarah had seen enough combat zones to recognize when peace was about to shatter. Thatcher watched from her paddock as Sarah moved about the property, the old mare's eyes following her former rider with steady attention. Despite her arthritis, Thatcher remained the guardian of the younger horses, positioning herself between them and perceived threats. Sarah paused in her preparations to offer the mare an apple, drawing comfort from the gentle lips that carefully accepted the treat. "You'd understand better than most, wouldn't you?" Sarah murmured, stroking the white blaze that ran down Thatcher's face. "Sometimes standing your ground is the only option." That night, Sarah received a text from Sheriff Darrow, large group at Gus's. "Tense situation. Threats made against several properties. Stay alert." 3 hours later, Scout's warning bark jolted Sarah from her vigilant rest on the living room couch. She moved silently to the window and counted 6 motorcycles approaching her gate, headlights cutting through the darkness. Behind them, 2 SUVs followed, the same model she'd seen days earlier. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her, the focused readiness that had kept her alive through dozens of operations. She whistled softly, and Scout fell into position beside her, his training overriding any anxiety. The men didn't bother with pretense this time. They cut the lock on her gate with bolt cutters and rode onto her property, forming a semicircle in front of her house. From their confident postures, they expected intimidation to do their work for them, a midnight show of force to frighten a single mother into compliance. Sarah reached for her phone and activated the recording function, set to upload automatically to a secure server. Evidence gathering, another habit from her former life. Then she stepped onto her porch, rifle visible but not raised, Scout a shadow at her side. "Private property," she called out, her voice carrying in the night air. "Turn around and leave now." The leader, a heavily built man with a graying beard and cold eyes, laughed. "Ms. McKenna, we tried to be reasonable. Unfortunately, time for negotiations has passed." "Negotiation implies good faith," Sarah replied evenly. "Breaking into someone's property past midnight isn't negotiation. It's criminal trespass, at minimum. Look around you." The man gestured expansively. "No witnesses. No help coming. Sheriff's dealing with a situation in town. Funny how those happen at convenient times." His smile revealed a gold tooth that gleamed in the porch light. "I'm Shadow. These are my brothers. And this valley belongs to the raiders now. You have 30 seconds to leave my property," Sarah stated, her tone making it clear this was not negotiable. Shadow's expression hardened. "Or what, lady? You'll call the cops that aren't coming? You'll shoot all of us." He nodded to his men, who began to spread out. "We're not here to hurt you. Just to help you understand your situation. Maybe rough up this nice place a bit, so you get the message." Sarah's finger rested lightly outside the trigger guard, her breathing steady. 10 seconds. One of the men moved toward the barn, where the horses had begun to stir anxiously. "Nice animals," he called back. "Shame if something happened to them." The line had been crossed. Sarah raised her rifle in one fluid motion, the sight finding Shadow with the precision that had once made her one of the military's most effective snipers. Final warning. The shot, when it came, was controlled and deliberate. Not a kill shot, but a disabling one that sent Shadow crashing from his motorcycle, clutching his shoulder in shock and pain. What followed was not the chaotic firefight the raiders might have expected. It was a methodical demonstration of why Sarah McKenna had been selected for the most elite operations in military history. 2 more shots disabled additional riders before they could even draw their weapons. Scout launched himself at another, taking the man down with the controlled aggression of his specialized training. The remaining men retreated in disarray, unprepared for effective resistance. One of the SUVs peeled away, abandoning their wounded leader, while the other attempted to provide covering fire, wild, panicked shots that Sarah easily avoided. In the barn, Thatcher trumpeted a distress call that echoed across the property, a sound Sarah had never heard from the gentle mare. It galvanized her, and her next shot took out a tire on the remaining SUV, sending it careening into a ditch. When silence finally fell, only Shadow remained, clutching his bleeding shoulder and staring at Sarah with newfound understanding and fear. Scouts circled him, maintaining a perimeter, while Sarah approached with the calm efficiency of someone who had interrogated countless combatants. "Those aren't biker colors," she observed, noting the custom insignia on his jacket. Military contractors. Private security. Who hired you? Shadow spat on the ground. You're dead, lady. You have no idea what you've started. Sarah knelt beside him, just out of reach. I know exactly what I've started. The question is whether you understand what you walked into. She pressed a field dressing against his wound, firm enough to help, painful enough to emphasize her control of the situation. Your men abandoned you. Standard protocol would be to eliminate witnesses at this point. Fortunately for you, I'm not on that kind of operation anymore. Fear flickered in Shadow's eyes as recognition dawned. You're military. Was, Sarah corrected. Green Berets. Special operations. Scout here was my partner for 6 deployments. She applied more pressure, making him wince. Now I'm just a mother protecting her home. But I remember my training. In the distance, sirens wailed, approaching but still minutes away. Shadow's face contorted with a mixture of pain and calculation. Those corporate suits don't care about you or your men, Sarah told him quietly. You're expendable, but I'm guessing you have information that could be valuable. A smart leader would recognize when to switch sides. By the time Sheriff Darrow arrived with 2 deputies, Sarah had secured the scene and tended to the wounded men. The evidence she presented, including surveillance footage, recorded threats, and the weapons recovered from the intruders, left little room for debate about the nature of the confrontation. Jesus, Sarah, Tom muttered, surveying the damage. This is beyond local law enforcement. I know, she replied. That's why I've already contacted the FBI, Organized Crime Task Force. They're particularly interested in Shadow's statement about corporate backing. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah led Thatcher and the other horses from the barn into the pasture. The old mare moved stiffly but purposefully, inspecting each of her charges before turning her attention to Sarah. The horse pressed her velvet muzzle against Sarah's chest in a gesture that felt remarkably like comfort. Scout joined them, his duty complete for now, allowing himself to relax into the simple pleasure of morning rounds with his human. Sarah scratched behind his ears, her eyes on the horizon where dust signaled the arrival of federal agents. We held the line, she told her animals softly. And this is just the beginning. The weeks that followed unfolded like a complex military campaign. Sarah's stand against the Shadow Raiders revealed an operation far larger than a simple land grab. Federal investigations uncovered a network of corporate interests using criminal proxies to acquire water rights, mineral deposits, and strategic properties across 5 states. Fox Hollow became ground zero in a battle that extended beyond physical confrontation into legal, economic, and information warfare. When corporate interests attempted to strangle the town financially, pressuring the local bank to call in loans, manipulating supply chains to create shortages, the community rallied around Sarah's example of resistance. Martha Winters transformed the general store into a coordination center, matching resources with needs. Sheriff Darrow, emboldened by federal backup, purged corruption from his department. Even Shadow, facing serious federal charges, turned informant, revealing the inner workings of an operation that had been systematically targeting vulnerable rural communities. Through it all, Sarah's farm became a symbol of resilience. Lily and Danny returned home to find their mother changed. More openly the warrior she had always been beneath the surface of everyday life, but their home secure. The children adapted with the remarkable flexibility of youth, taking pride in their mother's growing reputation as the woman who had stood against seemingly insurmountable forces. Scout thrived in his renewed purpose, his military training once again relevant as he helped secure the property and protected the family. The Belgian Malinois developed a particular protectiveness toward Danny, staying close to the boy during his nightmares and accompanying him to the school bus each morning. Perhaps most surprising was Thatcher's transformation. The arthritic mare, who had seemed destined for a quiet retirement, became an unlikely participant in Fox Hollow's resistance. When neighboring families faced intimidation, Sarah established a children's riding program centered around the gentle old horse, giving worried parents a reason to gather at her farm, sharing information, building community resilience, and finding strength in unity while their children learned to ride under Thatcher's patient guidance. On a crisp December morning, with snow dusting the mountains and smoke curling from chimneys throughout the valley, Sarah stood on her porch watching Lily lead a riding lesson in the paddock. Thatcher carried a small girl from the Jenkins farm, moving with careful steps that belied her age and infirmity. Danny sat on the fence, Scout vigilant beside him. While other children waited their turn, their parents gathered in small groups, drinking coffee and strengthening the bonds that had been forged through shared adversity. Martha Winters joined Sarah on the porch, her aged hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "Would you look at that?" she marveled. 6 months ago, half these families barely spoke to each other. Now you can't pry them apart with a crowbar. Sarah smiled, watching as Thatcher executed a perfect turn, responding to Lily's gentle guidance. That's how you win the real battles. Not with firepower, but with community. "Is it over, then?" Martha asked. The corporate folks seemed to have backed off. "Not over," Sarah replied thoughtfully, "but changed. They underestimated what they were facing, thought they could use force and fear against isolated individuals. They weren't prepared for a unified community or for their tactics to become public knowledge." In the paddock, Thatcher completed the lesson and stood patiently as Danny helped the little girl dismount. The old mare's eyes found Sarah across the distance, and for a moment, handler and horse regarded each other with the mutual respect of survivors who had found purpose and protection. Scout leaned against Sarah's leg, his vigilance never entirely absent but tempered now with contentment. She ran her hand along his back, feeling the scars beneath his fur that matched her own, physical reminders of battles survived together. "You know," Martha said after a comfortable silence, "when you first moved here with those 2 little ones, people wondered if you'd last a winter. Too quiet, they said. Too contained. Some thought you were running from something." Sarah watched her children moving confidently among friends, their earlier trauma giving way to a security born of knowing they were fiercely protected. "I was running towards something, not away. I just didn't fully understand what it was until recently." As if on cue, Sheriff Darrow's patrol car pulled up the driveway, followed by 3 other vehicles, families bringing food for the community lunch that had become a Saturday tradition. Tom stepped out, carrying a covered dish, his posture more confident than it had been before the confrontation. "The FBI called," he told Sarah as he approached the porch. 2 more indictments against corporate executives. They're using the RICO statutes now, treating the whole operation as organized crime. Sarah nodded, satisfaction warming her more effectively than the mug in her hands. Good. The higher up the chain the accountability goes, the better. In the fading autumn light, Fox Hollow seemed to glow with an inner warmth that defied the approaching winter. Sarah McKenna had come to Montana seeking peace after years of war, only to find herself fighting a different kind of battle, one for home, community, and the right to determine one's own future. As Thatcher made her way slowly back to the barn, flanked by children eager to help with her care, and Scout moved to escort Danny across the yard, Sarah reflected that her greatest victory hadn't come from her military precision or strategic thinking. It had come from building connections between neighbors who now protected each other, between children who would grow up understanding the value of standing together, and between the humans and animals who formed the heart of their resistance. The battle for Fox Hollow had transformed a quiet veteran into a reluctant leader, a community into a family, and an old mare into a symbol of dignified resilience. In finding their collective strength, they had discovered that true security came not from isolation but from interdependence, a lesson Sarah had always known but had forgotten somewhere along her journey from soldier to civilian. As she stepped down from the porch to welcome her neighbors, Sarah felt Scout press against her side, his steady presence a reminder of all they had survived together. Ahead, Thatcher nickered softly from the barn entrance, as if beckoning her toward the future they had all fought to secure, one where warriors found peace without surrendering their strength, and where the bonds between humans and their animal companions formed the unbreakable foundation of home.